Hello friends, welcome back to EPG Pathshala. A quick recap of what we did in the previous module, as this is the continuation of the previous module. In the previous module we saw what are triggers, why are they required, and how do we implement different types of triggers. We already saw implementing insert and update triggers, and we are yet to see the implementation of delete triggers. So, in this module the topics which we will be covering are as follows. The topics which we include here are the implementation of triggers which is pending of two triggers, delete, before and after delete. Then we will see the restrictions imposed on triggers, triggers versus stored procedures. Then we would start with another short topic of views. We will cover what are the advantages and limitations of views and the implementation of views. So, friends, let us start with our example implementation of before delete and after delete trigger. So, the first example which we take in delete trigger is the before delete trigger. Here up till now we first saw after always and then we saw before. In delete there is nothing much to maintain. Delete, when the trigger is getting deleted, before delete you can only check the cascading effects or if the certain type of records are not to be deleted, and in after delete the only option I have is maintaining the user details who has deleted. Before delete I still have the scope to fetch all the details into another table. So, let us start with the example of before delete. So, as we have already seen how to come from the alter table and to go to create trigger, add trigger before delete. So, before delete on employee for each row. If you remember, if you can recollect, we we managed already the log in the employee log table. If you can't remember the structure, you can have a look from here what are the data available in employee log structure. I am inserting into employee log. As I had told earlier, delete will always have the older values. So, I am old.employee ID, old.name, old.salary, and my action would be delete and the user who has deleted, the date when is it deleted. So, now and the user who has deleted will be the user function, and I apply this trigger, and once you apply you need to test and run the command prompt and the delimiter and things by default. So, let us go on to the command prompt and delete one record, but before that you need to recollect what is the data available. So, first of all I select star from employee log, there is one record available, employee ID 8 of Dakshish. Then I check into employee table what is the data available, which record I will be deleting. So, select star from EMP and I have data up to 6, 7. So, we can delete, we will be deleting the employee with employee ID 7. So, delete from employee where employee ID is 7, as you can see one row affected. Again I will check into the employee log table, and employee log table has the data of Chirag which I just deleted with the action of delete, updated date and deleted by user. Who is the user? So, root is the user and updated date is whenever date I have deleted. Remember, this is the before delete trigger we have written. Before delete we are maintaining who deleted so and so record. In case of after delete, we will be maintaining the user and the description of the action which was performed. So, the next example which we look at is after delete. Let us create a trigger on after delete and again add trigger, and as you can observe we have written all the triggers on this single table. If you remember, we wrote this log entry onto after update. I am copying the same log on after delete. I will just change the action of deleting and I will not have any new values over here. So, insert into employee log 1 values user first of all, concatenate delete employee record I will say, not the salary. So, here we are saying delete employee record, and here again if you observe, in update we had used new as well as old, but with reference to delete we will be using only old. So, here I am displaying this delete employee record, old dot name, old dot salary. All the new parameters I am deleting, there are no new parameters with delete. So, written one bracket of concat, one of values, insert, and we click on apply, and then after deleting, now we can test into two of the tables, employee log as well as employee log 1. So, I go to the command prompt and again I fire the delete statement. Before that, my employee log has got 7 and 8, my employee has got data up to employee number 6. So, I will be deleting employee 6 Rahul. So, I say delete from employee where employee ID is equal to 6, and before that I also look into the employee log table which has got update log entry as of now. So, I will delete from employee where employee ID is 6, one row affected, and now first of all I will check in employee log 1 table where it will have the entry of delete log record. So, it is delete employee, name is Rahul, salary is 10,000, and you will also view the entry into employee log table where we had written before delete trigger, that also has the entry of Rahul along with the action delete and the updated date and the user details. So, here we saw how you can make use of delete trigger with before as well as after. So, we have seen implementation of all the triggers of all the 3 actions with the event time, action time as before as well as after. So, I hope you will be now able to create different types of triggers. Just make sure that you do not create cascading triggers or you do not refer triggers within another triggers. There are certain restrictions on the triggers. Let us have a look at certain restrictions on the triggers, so that you can make sure that you are not using them when creating trigger. First, return statement is not permitted in the triggers, like you use return in functions, you use return for certain calling programs, return function is not permitted into triggers. One of the important point, trigger cache does not detect metadata. So, if I am making use of the metadata of certain system generated columns, I cannot make use of triggers for such purposes. The third point, triggers cannot be activated by referential integrities, that is foreign key actions cannot initiate my trigger. Foreign key actions meaning that if I am auto generating certain keys, if I am auto generating certain relationships, for that purposes I cannot make use of triggers. And last is triggers do not work on system tables. Now, why do we say they do not work on system tables? Because system tables are actually the views, they are not the actual tables, and triggers cannot work on views, and hence triggers will not work for system tables. So, keeping these restrictions on mind, I hope you will be creating triggers. So, you face lesser challenges in creating triggers. Let me also clarify that there is a lot of always the students have that mental notion that triggers are a very complex part of database and should not be used. But if you have already seen, triggers are not as complex as the hype is created. Triggers are very much easy only if you do not clutter the trigger, clutter the table with many triggers. If you have written only the triggers which are very much necessary or very much required, then I am sure you will not find triggers difficult, rather you will enjoy automating the task. As we said earlier that triggers are type of stored procedures. So, let us have a quick look at what is the difference between trigger and the stored procedure. Stored procedures are called explicitly, triggers as you know are called implicitly. Stored procedures can be scheduled, triggers cannot be scheduled. Stored procedures can accept the parameters, triggers cannot accept the parameters. Procedures are performing user specified actions, that is procedure are used for routine work like calculating the sum, returning the values based on parameters. But triggers are like maintaining the audit trail, that is they work on the DML statements like insert, update and delete. And finally, procedures can be called from front end, that is I can call a procedure from Java, PHP etc. Triggers cannot be called from front end, they need to be initiated implicitly only on the action of the DML statements. And after understanding triggers thoroughly, you should also know how you can drop the triggers, how you can remove and how you can view the triggers into your system catalog. So, to delete the trigger, drop trigger, trigger name, and to view triggers into your schema, you have the statement show triggers. So, show triggers displays you the list of the triggers available, as you can observe here. You have before trigger, after trigger, insert, update and delete. It displays me all the list of the trigger created, the SQL mode which is used, the definer which is used, the character code, the collation sequence and the database. So, when you want to see the full list of triggers into your database, you can make use of show trigger statement. So, friend, that is it about triggers. We will start another topic of views into MySQL, what actually are views and why views are used into the MySQL database. So, first of all, what all do we cover into views is as follows. So, here the topics which we will be covering are what are views, advantages and limitations of views, types of views and finally, implementation with the different examples of views. So, first of all, what are views? Now, views are the logical tables which do not exist physically. So, the type of logical tables, then if I say they are the logical tables, why do I need the logical tables? These logical tables are like a layer on the base tables in order to display or hide the selected data from the end user or from the other tables or from the calling routines. I can secure my data into views by just giving selected columns to the other user or selected data to the other user, so that I am not disturbing the base table. So, views are also the types of queries which are stored and referred to at a later stage. That is, if I am writing a complex query, then if after 5 days I want to write that query all over again, then I am supposed to think of the logic, think the query again and write the query. Rather, views give you the feature to store that select query as a virtual table and refer it at a later stage. We say that they are the virtual table, that means they are the layer between the base table and actually the user. You get a feeling of actually a table, but views just behave as a mediator. They go to the base table, fetch the data for you and display it to you. If you are performing some operations on it, again the operations are performed on the base table. So, using views, what are the advantages you have, and there are certain limitations also of using views. So, first let us have a look at advantages of views. As I said earlier, the simplification of complex queries. If I am saying I have to write a query which goes at least 15 lines long, it is the involving subqueries, it is involving joins, any complex query, I can create a view of that query and I am just supposed to select from that view. I am not supposed to give that complex query to someone else also, and I am also not supposed to remember it every time when I want to query the same type of data again and again. So, that is the first advantage, simplification of complex queries. Second advantage with reference to security, selective columns can be displayed or can be hidden from the end user. Third, security, that is my data is secured, I am not giving my base table, actual table to anyone, and I am just giving the selected columns to the end user. Last, no data storage is required because they are the virtual tables, I am not supposed to store the data. And one more important advantage is I can have calculated or derived columns directly into the views. That is, you are writing a query on that and you are making a table of it. So, you directly have that calculated columns into the table. We will see this point in our examples when we implement the views. After so many advantages, of course, there are a few limitations. So, the very few limitations are: one is performance consideration. Performance consideration is whenever you are trying to access the view, view always has to go onto the table, then bring your data or bring your whatever columns you have requested. And second, there is always a dependency on the table. That is, if the structure of your table changes, your view becomes obsolete. If your data changes, you need to requery it and then your data is updated or refreshed. So, apart from these two minor limitations, views have got many advantages, and that is why all your system tables are also given to you as views. You hardly realize that you are using them as views, but you are not allowed insert, you are not allowed update, and you hardly feel that your system tables or your information schema is actually entirely view, right. So, let us start with the implementation of how you can create a view, how actually views are integrated with your tables, and how we go ahead with it. Before actually understanding the example, let us understand the syntax of the view. As you know, in each and every database object, we have seen in the syntax that there is a word create or replace. Create or replace basically is how the compiler goes with it is, if that database object is already existing, it will drop that object first and recreate the object for you. And when you specify create or replace, that means you are allowing the compiler to actually drop the object and recreate. If you do not use the word replace, compiler will at that time give you the error saying the database object already exists. So, if you want always the compiler to drop it and recreate, you should make use of the keyword replace. One important part is there in the view syntax called algorithm. Though by default algorithm remains undefined, but there are two other things into algorithm: merger and temporary table. Now, what it does when we are using view with the base table? So, when you give algorithm as temporary table, you are telling the compiler to create a temporary table for so and so view. If I am using the algorithm as merger, I am telling the compiler to merge it with the base table. By default always the algorithm remains undefined. Definer clause we already know, it stores the user's detail. SQL security by default is the user who has created, is the owner is given as the security person, that is the invoker, and view is the keyword, and view name whatever name of your view, and column list, and as select from the table name. There is also with option, that is with cascaded, local or check, that is cascaded or local. Cascaded is if you are creating a view on a particular table, that table might have referential integrity constraints with multiple tables. So, if I am saying that a student table exists, student table has got the data of student personal and student exam. So, if I delete something from the student table, my two other tables are getting affected, student table as well as student marks. So, I should make sure that with that cascade option, other tables either they are also deleted or the compiler does not allow me to update that records. So, whenever you want to check this, whenever you want to force this type of checks with view, you make use of with option, cascaded or local. Okay. So, we start with the example of creating a view. Views exist as a separate database object, right click and create view. In the simplest terms, the view syntax can be thought of as create view, view name as select from table name. So, here I am saying create view, view name as select name comma designation from employee table. If you remember, my employee table had the fields employee ID, name, salary, etc. Now, here when we click on apply, it is here when we click on apply, it uses the schema by default and it will be using the delimiter also by default as soon as you click on apply. So, when we have finished executed the SQL statements, here you can observe that it has used the aliases select employee.employee name as the name, employee.designation as the designation, that is what are the fields I want for my view also. So, algorithm is undefined, definer is root and SQL security is the definer, that is the root. So, now when I say select star from new view is the name which it gave by default. So, it just has the name as well as designation. But here if I try to update, now I have selected only two columns from employee table, that is name as well as designation. I have not selected the key field, I have not selected the salary. So, ideally it will not allow me to update, but when you say update employee, set designation is equal to clerk where name is equal to Raj. Okay, here you get one row affected, I am allowed to update. But if I go and try to insert into this view, what happens? When you insert, you do not give the fields. I was able to update from the view, view has updated the underlying table, right. Now, but if I try to insert, my view has got only two columns, that is name and designation, but my underlying table has got 4 columns, employee ID, name, designation and salary. So, if I go and try to insert, it gives me the message that it is you are not allowed to insert, default value is not specified with the table. Now, what do I mean by default value over here? First is my primary key, I cannot give any default value to the key unless and until it is an auto increment. But if I would have given the default value to designation, then if I have included it employee ID into the table, it would have allowed me to insert into the underlying table. So, what I want to convey here is whenever your view is from single table and if it includes the same columns as the columns of view, the view will allow you to do everything, that is insert, update and delete. Here if you observed, we were able to update data into view, but it did not allow us to insert. Why? Because the columns are not same. So, in order to have view as updatable, I should have the view from single table and have all the columns of that particular view. So, we will have a look at a view with aggregate function. Now, any views with aggregate function by default becomes non-updatable, that is a read only view. Aggregate functions views are usually considered as to be just storage of complex queries. So, we will create aggregate function view. by using the salary column. I have given the name as max of sal, and I will display maximum salary designation wise. So, I say as select designation comma maximum salary from employee, and the grouping is on designation, group by designation. Okay. The schema given by default and applying the SQL. Here if you observe again the algorithm, and now when I select from max cell, I get designation wise maximum salary. Okay. So, accounts, clerk and manager 7,000, 1,300 and 13,000 something. But I also want to display name along with this, that is the person who has the maximum salary. That is how you can alter the view once created, that is what I want to show. So, again go on views, right click and say alter view. In alter view you can just go and there add the column comma name. If you observe over here, I am not adding the table aliases, the compiler is automatically adding the table aliases for me. I have added one column, compiler has again automatically added the alias, and now I go into the command prompt, that is the SQL prompt, and test again my view, that is select star from max cell. Name also is displayed, Jai has the salary 7,000 for designation assistant, clerk has 1,300 and manager has something 13,000. Okay. So, if I try to insert in this type of view, I told you that we are using the aggregate functions over here. So, whenever I have used aggregate function, the insert are forbidden, but my fields are designation, name and max of salary. So, I write the designation as anything clerk, name is whatever name you want to write. I have used the name of Jai again, and salary I write 10,000, and when I execute the query, it will give me the target table is prohibited for insert, that is insert is not allowed. So, we saw that the aggregate functions by default, any aggregate functions, any joins will make your views non-updatable, or rather I should say read only, which will be you can only view the data, but you cannot update or delete or insert into that data. We will have one more example of view, but before that, a view can be updatable only if it meets the following condition. First, the select statement refers to only one table. Select statement is not using any aggregate functions. Select statement is not making use of distinct keyword, that is you are not fetching distinct, and select statement is not referring to other views which are defined as read only. So, this is the criteria for any view to be any view. If you want to make it updatable, if these are not fulfilled, you cannot have you cannot access or cannot change the view. Now, before we come to the end of the session, we will see the last example of how I can create view from multiple tables. Now, for that, for creating view from multiple tables, I am making use of a table called department. I have created one more table here, department, which has department ID, name and location. I have given the reference of department into the employee table. Now, how you can change the reference? You can alter the table, you can go into foreign keys, and from foreign keys you can add a foreign key where reference is of department table, department ID. Make sure that you have data type same, only then it will allow you to enter the foreign key. I will create a view from multiple table. Here I am giving the name of the view as employee department. So, create view employee department as select e.employee ID. I am selecting all the fields of employee table, and I select all the fields of department table. and I join on both the columns. So, I join on both the columns. I am including both employee and department, and where E dot department ID is equal to D dot department ID, applying and directly executing the query. It has added aliases for each of the table defined, and when you go and execute and you say select star from EMP department, it will display you all the data of employee, employee ID, name, salary, designation, department ID, name and location. So, here one important thing to observe is if you are writing the insert statement over here. Now, I am using multiple tables, I have given relationship onto multiple tables, and when I try and go and insert onto this employee, any name you add, designation you add, department ID, department name, location, everything you add, and when you execute the query, it will give you the message that cannot insert, your view has a join clause. So, that is what I wanted to show you over here, that when you are using views from multiple tables, it is not possible or not advisable to update that particular view. Now, whenever you create a view or whenever you are using the view, you will always like to see how the views are stored or where are the views stored. Of course, we are looking at select from the table name and select from the view name, but which tables or which tables are listed as tables and which tables are listed as views. If I want to see that, I have got two statements. When you give the statement show tables, it of course displays you the list of tables, but here when you give show tables, it is displaying you the list of tables, but when I want to see views, I should make use of show full tables. So, here you observe that these are the base tables, but these are the views. So, in our views session, that was it for the view session. You can try creating views from multiple tables, you can try creating views from single tables, you can use views for aggregate functions. So, friends, in our next session, we will be integrating this things which we have learned into the MySQL, that is the database objects of MySQL into PHP. So, our next module will be integrating all the database objects into PHP. Thank you so much.